Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Taylor Grossman. I'm a program associate at Prospect SV. Very excited to have you here. Empower Procurement is a California-funded program run by Prospect SV. This particular event is dedicated to local government agencies sharing their best practices for trying to reduce carbon emissions. So today, we're going to start with the agenda. I'm going to hand it off to Doug Davenport afterward, followed by the four speakers. Each speaker will have 15 minutes to share their best practices, and then we'll open the floor up for questions for each speaker within those 15 minutes. Afterward, if any last questions, we'll answer those, and then we'll call it a day. This should be a pretty quick and casual event. Again, if you have any questions while they're speaking, share them in the chat, or we'll open the floor up after they're done with each of their presentations, and you can ask them with the mic. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to hand it off to our founder and executive director, Doug Davenport. You have the floor, Doug.
Good afternoon. Just want to do a quick mic check. You can hear me okay, Taylor?
Sound great.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. We're very happy to have you all. I'm just going to start you off with a little bit about what Empower Procurement is, and then we're going to get on to why you're really here, which is to hear from leaders that are getting the job done and have some best practices to share on procurement and how that has helped with their decarbonization or sustainability programs. So with that, just a little bit about what is Empower Procurement. Empower Procurement is a program funded by the California Energy Commission EPIC program. It is an effort that has gone on for a couple of years now, and will be moving forward until about mid next year. The core focus of Empower Procurement is to unlock barriers or hindrances to better sustainability outcomes, in this case, lower carbon and better cost efficiency, simply through procurement, through better approaches to procurement, better procurement policies, better procurement tools. This program is it's led by Prospect Silicon Valley. It is really a partnership between Prospect SV, Berkeley Lab, who's been a leader in sustainable procurement in the federal sector for many years, Energy Solutions, a consulting firm here in California, and the Z&E Alliance. Also, you may know Richard Shorsky, its executive director. We also have had several other partners, including California State University, Ecomedes Procure, and Local Government Commission, which we all know by now is known as CivicWell. You may have heard about this event from a CivicWell publication, and we're very happy to be such great partners with such a great organization. So just a little bit about what we mean by Empower Procurement and looking at sustainability outcomes. Let's go to the next slide here. So when you look at greenhouse gas emissions coming from public institutions, that's local governments, that's higher education, that can be schools, other organizations of that kind, really the majority of the carbon emissions coming through those institutions could be controlled through purchasing practices. This is also very true of the federal government and other institutions, but here in the state, we're looking at those institutions as an opportunity to reduce carbon statewide. We look at various aspects of procurement, working with different partners, and we unlock those kind of systemic barriers, whether that's an organizational strategy, a policy, or if it's the tools and information that are being used to make purchasing decisions. We are finding barriers that we know can be addressed, and we're looking to relate those ideas system-wide, so across all local governments in California, for example, and look for ways to socialize. This challenge discussion is just one of those ways that we can connect with all of you about what we're learning. Let's go to the next slide real quick. Overall, when we look at this, we look at improving tools, and we're doing numerous projects under this program on enterprise procurement systems and other kinds of procurement language. You can see on the empowerprocurement.com website, which I'm sure Naima can share, you will find an acquisition language library that will provide you additional tools for specifications. We're also looking to facilitate, smoother processes. This discussion is one of those ways to look at how others have done things well, to see if there's a way that you could pick up that idea. Providing information to you and also connecting with people that are really influencing the overall purchasing process, very important to us. So let's talk about today's challenge. So here we're talking about sharing best practices. We've often seen, especially with large, independent, somewhat networked organizations like local governments are, like college campuses are, like other groups can be. Often there are really great strategies that fit kind of somewhere within that system, but it's not well known to all. And if there were a mechanism for better and more fluidly catching best practices and adopting those rapidly, good things happen. So today we're taking a very humble step toward that goal with having our guest speakers provide a little bit of news on how they've done this. So I'm very grateful that we have Natalie and Andre and Allison and Jesse in here to share their experience with you. Now, I just want to say up front that if you have questions, please use the chat. We can get to those questions, and for goodness sakes, if something is really hitting you here, we want to help you connect with these individuals so that you can take advantage of what you're learning today. So I believe with that, I am to introduce Natalie De Leon of Santa Clara County. I really appreciate you being here, Natalie, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you, Doug. Can everybody hear me okay? Coming through loud and clear? Great, okay, thank you. So I'm Natalie from the County of Santa Clara. I work in our Facilities and Fleet Department in our Sustainability Group, which sounds like an odd connection for sustainable purchasing, but the idea was that we would form a working group from county departments that all had a stake in sustainable purchasing. So my group, we issue RFPs, we award contracts, and for goods anywhere from capital projects to maintenance of our buildings, energy, recs, all kinds of things. And we, of course, work with our Office of Sustainability to meet our sustainability goals. So I became involved in this also through my Zero Waste program, as more of a practitioner to test out whatever policy we were going to create would result in something actionable, something measurable, and a program that we could all work within and also meet our sustainability goals. So we started this effort, we can go to the next slide. We started this effort in 2020, early 2020. It was led by the Office of Sustainability, our procurement department, our Office of Contracting Management. And the idea was really to create a policy that, as I mentioned, could be actionable, that's something that we could implement. We had a policy in place years before, but it never went anywhere. There was never any resources behind it that or anything that we could measure, look back on to see any progress. Few things changed, like we ordered recycled paper, but really it didn't move the dial as much as it could have, maybe. We really wanted to create a program that we could implement. And so what this led to was developing a broad policy, and along with that policy, create some more specific administrative guidelines and recommendations, tools such as contract language and templates that we could apply to solicitations and contracts that would help us implement this policy and the specific guidelines attached to the commodities. So we started with trying to come up with a test case sort of thing. We used SB 1383. And since we had to do this anyway, it was kind of it was a good test case in that way, because we could easily get everyone on board, with resources being strained, especially in early 2020, dealing with our agency dealing with COVID and all the response that just, took our organization off track. Sustainable purchasing was kind of at the very bottom of the list at the time, but because this regulation came, we really had to go for it. So we use that as our test case. We developed guidelines around it and all of the tools I just spoke of. And we were able to finally pass the policy late December of last year. And we're still working with our county council to just do the final tweaks on all of our templates, but that's going well. We've done a lot of outreach with the departments involved in purchasing of paper, compost, and mulch. And so we're getting ready to test that first set of commodities. Then we kind of regrouped and said, okay, what's our next step? And we landed on issuing an RFP for an impact study. And the intention for this will be to help us determine which commodities we should tackle next, whether it be because of cost, because of GHGs, just whatever would make the most impact and be able to be our next step towards this. Also help us understand where we might need to beef up our staffing, our resources that are dedicated to this program to continue to move it forward. So we have now added a position to our procurement department as a strategic sourcing officer, so that we're hiring for now. And we've requested a position with our Office of Sustainability as a program manager for this program. So those are the next, milestones that we hope to achieve. And last slide. So just to recap on some of the lessons learned here, I think working with the different departments that each have such different focus, looking back, I wish we had kind of started from, just communication 101, where we all learned more about each other's practices and what certain terms mean. You see there on the slide, defining terms like program, for example, that can mean so many different things to the different departments. So it raises alarms, whereas the rest of us might, procurement here's program and they think something else. Me, FAF here program or project, and I think something totally different. So it's, getting on that same page, defining terms, and just making sure that we're all talking about the same thing. Even if we're using plain English, it may not be interpreted that way. Also, just, there has to be compromise. And for example, as I said, we ended up with a test case that really wasn't the initial plan. The initial plan was to move full speed on a full-blown program. But given our resources and at the time and our bandwidth, considering we were all adjusted to the different staffing throughout our organization in response to COVID, this really was a different path that we took. But it ended up actually really being good because we got to test what we had created and see if it was even going to work in practicality. When we're sitting down writing an RFP, is that really going to get us where we want to go with these sustainability goals and objectives? And then just to keep checking in with ourselves every so often to make sure we are still on the same page, that we're all still have the same goals in mind, and just that we're we're still on the same team, where there may be different ideas of how to get there, but we're all still trying to get to the same place. So I'll stop there and I'll take any questions that might have come up.
I do have a question for you
course.
before you introduce the next speaker. So it's great that you're doing this, and it's very interesting that each of your departments kind of see things differently. So I'm going to assume that maybe they would evaluate simple things, or seemingly deceptively simple things like cost differently? Does your procurement practice here, sustainable procurement practice, put people on kind of a level table in terms of, let's say, total cost of ownership or other kind of forms of cost analysis?
So yeah, so those are kind of the tools that we all need to review and decide how we're going to create these guidelines, right? So whether we're just looking simply at the cost of these products, or whether we're using some kind of evaluation criteria that includes sustainability goals and other components that would make where we can say, well, we're willing to pay maybe a little bit more to get this type of product. So that's where we really need to work with procurement on the contract language and the solicitation language, to make sure that in evaluation we can account for that in our procurement processes.
Okay. We do have another quick question. I was actually going to ask your co-speaker, Andre, to ask his question directly to you.
Sure.
Hi, Natalie. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I was curious if you could elaborate a little on the case that you made for that staffing position, or those two staffing positions. What pushback did you get from your management or from the Board of Supervisors, and how did you make the case to get those hires?
So far we have not yet, we're still in our budget cycle, so we have not yet heard any feedback on the program manager position. The procurement position, I'm less familiar with how that process went. I think I remember them saying it was a simple add delete. So maybe there was another code that they didn't have use for any longer and switched it to this. Along with our policy, we did write a ledge file to the board about this policy effort. We also have a sustainability master plan that outlines our different goals and strategies for our sustainability goals, and creating a sustainable purchasing program was one of our strategies. So, we had that in our back pockets to use as guidance to our board and our departments and managers as to what was needed in order to carry this out. And I'm happy to share, I can link you all in the chat to our ledge file and our sustainability master plan.
That would be great. Is that something we might share more broadly also?
Absolutely, yeah.
If you would not mind.
So no, it's public,
Okay.
public documents. So share away.
Great. We're going to put it on a pole and wave it around like a flag. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, our next speaker, Natalie, were you going to introduce?
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry,
sure.
we have one more question.
Oh, sure.
This love here. Alice, if you want to unmute and ask yourself, or we can just.
Hi, sorry, I have two mute buttons here to deal with. So I was just noting that our engineering division, when they get a project to do some kind of renovation on a building, they really look at their operating budget. I'm sorry, their construction budget. They do not consider operating costs, and it's been very, very difficult to get them to understand. I mean, get them to consider that we really need to look at the operational costs, because that's what council cares about. That's what our long-term goals are. And often we have fewer occupant complaints for the maintenance division, which is also part of Public Works, to have to deal with. I'm having a meeting coming up, which will be hopefully a meeting of the minds on this sort of thing. And I feel very grateful that you guys are now addressing this sort of thing. Thanks.
Yeah, we have a variety of things that we currently use to help us get there. Obviously we're trying to increase our policy language and put more specifics around what the guidelines and requirements are. Our planning team, they have a checklist that our program managers for our capital projects go through to see what the guidelines and requirements are. Can they implement them into their project? Can they plan for them? What's needed that type of thing. So this is something that we're also working with our planning group to get on their checklist so that, you know, we can start talking about that early on. And we just had, for example, a building that we built from ground up, our Vietnamese American Cultural Center. And that has some great sustainability stories to it. And all of that started way, way early on with charrettes and meetings between the designers, the community, the staff at facilities and fleet. So yeah, it's a long process, but the more I think, you know, you just get that out in front of people and talk about it in the beginning, a little bit easier it becomes.
Right. There has been a real push for straight electrification. Just electrify and everything will be fine. And I know it's just like, well, yes, but they're not necessarily going to be more comfortable. They're still going to have glare from the windows and draftiness and all of that. So it's a really, you're exactly right. It's a big process. Hard for people to understand. Thank you. Sorry.
Not to mention the efficiencies you have to bring along with electrification in order to make it work as a system. So totally
Yes.
appreciate that. So thank you very much. We're going to introduce our next speaker, Andre Devort. I do not mind taking a stab at your name. I love to say it, even if I say it wrong. So it's great to hear from you, and I'm glad that you can be part of this forum.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Natalie. So I wanted to share something with the forum today that we don't actually know if it's a successful strategy or not. But in the spirit of the forum, we really wanted to just share what we were up to and recognize that this is, you know, a very much an emerging topic. So nothing that you can take away and go ahead and implement tomorrow. But as you'll see, maybe there is some things that you can get involved with as we develop this program. So I wanted to share about something that is actually not in my role as the City of Cupertino Sustainability Manager, but the other hat that I wear is sitting on the executive committee for an organization called ABAG Power. And of course, you're familiar with ABAG, but there's a lesser known but equally interesting program of ABAG known as Power. So I'll talk a little bit about that program today and how we're leveraging that in our decarbonization journey. So you may be familiar with the topic of energy procurement. Sometimes cities have this in a public works department or a purchasing division. I've noticed there's really nothing common or special about where this role sits in an organization. Sometimes it's just set up one time and the bills come to you. But we wanted to get serious about energy procurement and what it means for our decarbonization efforts. And of course, you may be familiar with community choice aggregators. This conversation started back in, gosh, probably 2012, 2015. The conversation really started to get going here in the Bay Area about community choice aggregation, which is a way for local entities to purchase carbon-free or renewably produced electricity. So fast forward to today, actually a majority of Californians are getting their electricity from one of these types of organizations, from a CCA. Examples would be Marin Clean Energy, which was the first one, Silicon Valley Clean Energy here in Santa Clara County, which is ours, East Bay, San Diego just started. So statewide, this is a pretty big initiative and is creating some pretty incredible results when it comes to procurement and also carbon emissions. So in some places, these CCAs are providing either carbon-free or 100% renewable electricity. And you know, those strategies, those purchasing strategies, you know, the most interesting part to me about this phenomenon is that those strategies are now developed on a regional or local level, whereas before it was kind of as a local agency or an individual, you would be pretty much powerless about where the supply of your energy comes from. Now those decisions are being made locally, And revenues from the sale of retail electricity in these spaces is now actually staying local, and it's generating some really interesting results when it comes to local programs, local technical support. And for us here in the city of Cupertino and many of our neighbors, we've been huge beneficiaries of this joint powers authority and the revenues that it brings into supporting our own efforts for our climate action plans. So I wanted to raise this, that you may not know that you have this ability as well on your gas bill. In California, as a commercial or municipal agency, you can actually go out and purchase your gas from anybody. You don't have to get it from PG&E. 22 years ago, the Bay Area agencies got together and formed this organization called ABAG Power. So this is a long-standing organization. It's essentially a group purchasing arrangement. We serve about 40 to 50 different public organizations in the Bay Area, in the greater Bay Area. And members include municipalities like the city of Cupertino, but also organizations such as police, fire stations, prisons, zoos, you name it. There's a large variety, water treatment stations, there's a large variety of entities that are served by ABAG Power for their gas supplies. There's two things that we want to achieve. Number one is rate stability, and number two is they also seek to get at least equal to or less than what we would pay for retail gas compared to PG&E. So that's just setting up what it is. I feel like I have to explain it, even though it's been going for 22 years. It's, again, kind of buried in these organizational org charts. Set it, forget it almost. Someone gets the gas bill, it's usually not recognized that it comes from this organization compared to PG&E. So I always like to set it up to explain what we do at ABAG Power. So what do we do with regard to sustainability? Well, we realized that this is a very unique type of purchasing organization. We're not just trying to sell gas. We also have lots of other mandates and needs that we need to meet. And as a publicly organized and publicly governed organization, we on the executive committee made a move a number of years ago to start exploring what this means in terms of decarbonization. Where do we as a gas supplier fit into the story of a transition away from fossil fuels? And Doug just mentioned, the urge towards electrification. And so we saw this trend gathering a lot of steam, and we decided to conduct a study and see what our place was as an organization in this road to a zero carbon, maybe zero gas future. And so we really started to dig into the details of what that means. And here on the screen, what I'm showing is a roadmap that was developed out of that process. And it starts with a few considerations. Number one, this is an emerging market. We have no idea really what level of supply of these types of products is out there. And what are we even looking for? We're looking for some type of product that can help our membership reduce their carbon emissions from their existing assets. These are heating boilers, sometimes industrial processes like a wastewater treatment plant, et cetera. So these are big things that probably aren't going to be electrified right away. That's kind of the target that we're looking at. Is there a way to supply them with products that are lower emissions? So the study found out that yes, these products are out there, but they're very rare. They're things like dairy gas from methane from landfills or from dairy operations. And another one that's emerging is energy produced from food wastes. And you may all be familiar with SB 1383, which actually requires us to develop a strategy to actually purchase items that are created from food scraps. And one of those categories is energy as an option for us. So what we learned is that there's nothing on the market today, at least not on the scale that can support all of our member agencies. But we're trying to develop a roadmap to help along the path and maybe even develop this market. And what's really interesting about this strategy and this roadmap is that we're really planning for the elimination of the need of a gas purchasing agency at all. So it's completely fascinating. You wouldn't find this kind of study in a typical supplier because suppliers are in the business of supplying. We're looking at this from the angle of what does a responsible transition away from fossil fuels look like in practice, and that's really what we're trying to figure out. So we're exploring different types of products. Just like with electricity, you can bundle products, maybe provide like some certain percentage of this low carbon fuel into the pipelines, and with a contractual arrangement for members that they could claim lower emissions. But how do you meet kind of the strict audit requirements that climate action plans and greenhouse gas accounting is kind of maturing into, going away from greenwashing and just purchasing unbundled RECs? So, again, this is not a successful strategy, but it's really a fascinating, interesting story that we're on the cusp of. And you can learn more by traveling to the project website there, which is really describing this roadmap. You can see how we polled our membership to see what their concerns were and are around both, got to keep the heat on, literally, and also transition to lower carbon fuel sources while we're electrifying everything. So where all this will fit into the overall picture, I'm not sure, but we think that there'll be some type of product and role for these types of purchases for at least the foreseeable future. And I think that's all I wanted to share. If you look it up, your agency may be served by ABAG Power, and if you are, please contact me and Ryan Jacoby, the project manager, because we're still looking for participation in designing this roadmap further. With that, happy to take any questions.
So the roadmap link was shared in the chat box for folks. Thank you, Naima. There was a question from Alice. Don't know if we can put you on the spot here, but the spot price for a therm under ABAG Power compared with the IOUs or other providers?
We haven't been doing well, frankly, because of the volatility of the gas markets. We're a group purchasing organization, so we're probably doing better than if one agency was out there on their own making purchases. Our strategy has evolved over the years. The most recent change in the strategy came 2 years ago when we started actually purchasing gas supplies directly from Canada, so doing international markets now. But we've been trending a little bit above the retail rate from PG&E in the last 2 years, mostly because of the extreme volatility. But when we poll our membership, it's actually more important for most of our members to have rate stability. And so the purchasing strategy has actually prioritized stable rates. So actually your monthly bill will be exactly the same every month. And that's a strategy to try to give people some more budget certainty. So that's been a strategic decision that's made every year when we go back to the membership.
Got it. Okay, that's great. Other questions for Andre? Okay, well, this is very interesting again, and we'll be sure to share this with our greater kind of constituency under Empower Procurement, if that's okay. I assume that's great. And thanks for your comments. So our next speaker, and Andre, are you going to introduce?
Sure. I believe next up is Allison with the City of Sacramento.
Thank you, Andre. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. My name is Allison Kerstetter, and I am a program specialist with the City of Sacramento Public Works Fleet Management Division. I supervise the asset management group, and we're basically responsible for purchasing all of the vehicles, equipment, trailers that the city needs. So currently we have about 2,700 fleet vehicles, and we on average replace about 250 a year. I'm also responsible for writing the council reports and contracts for shop operations for any vehicles we need to purchase, and fuel. And I do the bid soliciting and oversee the motor pool for the city as well. The city of Sacramento has been pretty successful in purchasing vehicles that are EV, EVs, and as well as alternative fuel vehicles. And one of the reasons that we've been so successful is because we went to our city council and updated our sustainability policy in December of 2017. We had one previous to that, but there wasn't a lot of measurable ideas or measurable goals within that policy. And it also did not include what has helped us the most, which is a ZEV first purchasing strategy. So some of the highlights from our sustainability policy are actively incorporating low emissions vehicles with a minimum commitment of replacement purchases to be 50% alternatively fueled by 2018 and 75% by 2025. Of those low emission and ZEV vehicle acquisitions, we provided a minimum commitment of 50% ZEV light duty vehicles to be ZEV by 2018 and 75% by 2020. If ZEV wasn't available or was not operationally able to complete the department's needs, we would then purchase some type of alternative fueled vehicle. We also wanted to reduce our fuel by 5% annually by using different things for alternative power, such as electric, hybrids, and different types of alternative fuels, such as CNG and LNG. So in the event that a department did not think that a ZEV would be the best choice for their operations or for their department, they had to, and they still have to, fill out a exemption form. And this form was created because, as I'm sure everybody else knows, when you're trying to change something, especially in, I feel like in government and municipalities, that gets a lot of pushback. Not a lot of change is not welcome by many of the staff members. So the exemption form was created to make them actually prove that they would not be able to work with or operationally meet their needs with an electric vehicle. So there are 4 different reasons for exemption on the ZEVs in Sacramento. And one is a public safety vehicle or an emergency response function. So for instance, our police vehicles, we didn't require them to fill out the ZEV exemption form. However, one of the things that we did do is we converted them from an all gasoline vehicle to a hybrid police patrol vehicle, which is very exciting because we have a ton of those vehicles in our fleet. And now we are purchasing only hybrids for them, which is saving us a ton of fuel. Another reason for an exemption is if you or your vehicle is driving over 600 miles per week. That's just due to the amount of times that you would have to charge in the vehicle. And Sacramento is a fairly small area. We're a 10 square mile city. So if you're driving over 600 miles a week, that's a lot of miles in our city. Also, if there were any challenges due to infrastructure or access to charging, that could be a reason that there was an exemption granted for an electric vehicle. We've been working a ton with our facilities group to get charging stations at all of our city facilities. We just recently, and it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen before the end of our fiscal year in July, are asking for I think, $2.4 million to have a 5-year plan just for electric charging stations for city vehicles. And so we're working with our facilities group and trying to figure out how many electric vehicles we will be buying within those 5 years and at what locations they'll be parked. And that way we'll be able to have a better idea of how many chargers that we're going to need at those locations. And the fourth and final reason for the potential electric vehicle exemption is that it operationally will not meet the department's needs. So if for some reason the department is running a sedan and they won't be able to complete their job with an electric vehicle, that is one reason why we potentially would not purchase an electric vehicle for them. So if they were granted an exemption from the electric vehicles, we would move to something like a plug-in hybrid or some type of alternative fuel, or in the event none of them were viable options, we would move to a plain hybrid vehicle, which there aren't a ton of options for us to purchase right now. So those are becoming less and less, and it's becoming more of an electric fleet. Next slide, please. So we find with fleet management, the best procurement practice is to find any type of cooperative contracts that we can use to purchase our vehicles. And the most common contracts that we're using right now are the California state vehicle contracts. We really rely heavily on Sourcewell and HGAC cooperative contracting, especially for our bigger vehicles and our trailers and equipment. And we also use individual county and city contracts if they're available and if they are meet our procurement standards within the city. And one more thing that we have done that helps to move the purchasing process along is standardizing our vehicles. So for instance, if we purchase the same brands, the same makes and models of vehicles and equipment, it's a lot easier in the procurement game to assist with less purchases. It's less administrative work because you have one contract you're purchasing under. You can purchase the same vehicle one time if you have to purchase multiple. So for instance, if you're going to purchase multiple Chevy Bolts under the same request, you have one purchase order as opposed to multiple purchase orders for multiple vehicles. So it also provides less tracking of units to determine when they're actually going to be delivered, and less dealings with the dealership and less paperwork getting mixed up. So those are some of the best practices that the city of Sacramento completes with in their fleet management division. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Well, there's a question I hope you can answer. Might be too soon to answer, we'd understand, but have you selected a hybrid for the police fleet?
Actually, we've been purchasing the hybrid now for, I think, about 3 years.
Oh, okay.
We have ordered the Ford PPV Interceptor hybrid version, and that we've heard no complaints. It was actually a hard sell to get the police department to sign off on a hybrid, even though they've been driving the Ford Fusion hybrid for years prior to that. They were concerned about the lighting on their patrol vehicles. They run the air conditioning nonstop in the summer. And a lot of times those vehicles are sitting on scene with potentially their lights, their air conditioner, and a lot of their systems running. So they were just concerned about the hybrid option and that it draining their battery. But actually there has been no complaints so far. The initial order was 6 vehicles just as a test run. And now every year we order all of the Interceptors in the hybrid model, and we purchase roughly 40 to 50 a year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
other questions for Allison? Well, again, this was excellent and really appreciate you sharing. I think we are down to our final, certainly not the least, presenter. Jessian, we would love to hear from you from the city of San Francisco.
Hi, I'm Jessian Choi with San Francisco Department of Environment. I'm on the toxics reduction team, and I've been with the department since 2007, although we had an ordinance, I'm going to call it the Buy Green Ordinance for short, in 2005. And my background is more in behavior change, taking classes from Dr. Mackenzie Moore's sustainability and behavior change and some other dabble in other behavior change. But today I was going to talk about customizable online stores where basically out of everything we've tried over the years, creating a website, for example, we've tried creating a website, sfapproved.org, where we list, where we try to make it our one-stop shop for our 29,000 city staff to buy less toxic, safer, compliant products on that are discounted on city contracts. We tried to make that website kind of the one-stop shop where they can get the supplier names, product names, and the discounted prices. But even though we created that website, we still heard from most of our staff that we serve that they just don't want us to make them think. They don't want to go to another website and read a lot of criteria that we have on our website where you can go there and copy and paste any of our criteria for any of our product categories, but they don't want to wade through all that. They would much rather have customized online stores where they only see what we allow them to buy. So we've worked with that model, although though we have contracts where we can do that, it's been difficult because it's like a game of cat and mouse where even though the suppliers say they'll follow the contracts and not show the products city staff are not allowed to buy, we often find that those products still end up in these customized online stores because we do spot check every quarter. So we've teamed up with the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, SPLC, and we welcome you all to join us in working on office supplies. So we're working on creating stakeholder kind of driven office supply specs that any organization can copy and paste. And those specs not just include specs for the products, but specs that have where we know these kind of major office suppliers around the country can have the technical ability to hide the products that city staff are, people shouldn't be buying or that you don't want them to buy. So that's my main tip that I was asked to talk about, but I have many other ones if you want to ask me about anything. That's the short version. I'll just stop there and see if anyone has questions.
We do have a little time, so why don't you just expand a bit?
Okay, so I think I'll move on from the online stores. I'll say the other things that I found helpful over the years is working with people most likely to comply instead of working with people who just are counting down like their 5,005 days till retirement, but people that are most likely to care about their health and our environment. So that can be different in every organization. For us, we found the product category that is where I've experienced the most kind of self-policing or self-enforcement is with carpet. So we passed a carpet regulation a few years ago. And since there wasn't a product list out there that met our criteria, we created a list and that's on our website. And we found that the manufacturers, since there's so few manufacturers that comply, that if they get word that the city department is trying to buy non-compliant carpet, then we hear about it. Unlike any other product category where there's too many manufacturers, too many distributors. So that's one other success that I've seen. I can keep going, but I'll just see if anyone has questions because there are many more tips.
I have a question I bet a lot of people are going to be thinking, and that is how did you come up with carpet? What was your process for deciding what mattered the most? Could you maybe share a bit?
Sure. We try to look at exposure, especially to toxic materials, toxic chemicals. And as you may already know, that PFAS chemicals, there's 9,000 of them in the PFAS class. And they're in almost every surface in the building, from mirrors to glass to fabric on furniture and carpet, anything water, grease, and stain resistant. And they, a lot of them are cancer causing, and they never degrade. And we breathe them anytime you sit on your upholstered, chair, like you're breathing in these chemicals because the dust comes out of these, upholstered furniture. So, and carpet, we know that because carpet sometimes is often being cleaned, so sometimes getting in the wastewater. So, and when people buy carpet, they usually buy a lot. So that was one of the reasons.
Questions for Jessian? We have a few minutes.
I'd dive in with a question.
Please.
I was just typing it out, but I thought I'd save a minute. Thanks, Jessian. I was curious if you could share more about your experiences with the SPLC. We were members last year, but I wasn't able to really get any headway on the whole program development piece, which is very comprehensive. But we're going to try again this next fiscal year. So any tips on getting engagement from especially internal folks and going through the SPLC processes?
Meaning how to work with SPLC, like how to do things like create office supply specs. Like we just kind of presented that, I pitched that idea to them. Or what do you mean by program development?
Oh yeah, that's exactly it. So I was curious if you just grabbed the materials from SPLC and then worked with your own staff to socialize those, or did you make use of their more like, because I know they offer also like a whole programmatic development service where they'll interview your partners internally and help you with the whole program thing. So it seems to have like great specs, but also this comprehensive program thing, which I would love to do.
Yeah, we didn't process on having them interview our staff. We didn't go down that road, so I can't speak to that. But I'm currently looking at their refrigerant guide, their procurement recommendations for refrigerants, which is really complicated. So I find I'm just kind of digesting all that and figuring out how it's packaged pretty well, where I can kind of just with a little bit of digesting, figure out how to implement that in our organization. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I have one more tip if anyone wants to know.
We're dying to hear.
Okay, so my I guess there are two kind of unrelated tips, but I would suggest that, and you might already do this, but in your contracts, if you are able to, include a liquidated damages clause in there, just so that if suppliers don't follow what's in the contract, you have a way to hold them accountable financially in a way that has teeth. And then the other tiny tip would be we've experimented with just letting our city staff, sometimes they're an office manager and they have many other hats, just take our product specs or our product criteria and paste them into RFPs and go out to bid. But what we found is that some things they get back from suppliers are really complicated, like especially for furniture. And so it really helps to have someone on your team be part of the bid evaluation process and really be making sure that whatever the suppliers are sending back when they bid, that what they're bidding on actually meets the criteria. We've found a lot of kind of gaps there.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Jesse, and thanks to Allison and Andre and also Natalie for your presentations. Where you have information to share, in form of a PDF or otherwise, we're going to make sure other people see this. It's going to go on to the Empower Procurement website, and we can share it in other ways. I also just want to mention that, you know, if you are a sustainability manager and you're working on fleet electrification, or if you're working on building decarbonization, there are opportunities for you to become involved with Empower Procurement in a couple of ways. One, we do have what we call a peer forum, where practitioners get together like we are today, and either talk about best practices as we are, talk about funding opportunities that are coming up in ways that you can help, you can organize, or talk about emerging innovations or emerging technologies as well. We also, you know, do have an opportunity through Empower Procurement possibly to assist you and to provide some free help in organizing a plan or organizing a strategy. And so we would encourage you to get involved there. I will make sure either in the chat right now, or more likely in the follow-up to this meeting, we will send information about the peer forums and give you information to help you connect with us in the future if there is an interest in any of the assistance that we can provide under the program. I think with that, we're about out of time. We got a lot of questions covered after each presentation. I'm just going to do a quick proverbial last call for questions before we adjourn for the afternoon at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Never was intentional, but here we are. Sounds like we're good. And with that dud of a joke, I am going to wish you all well. Hope you have an excellent day. Thank you all for being here. And again, thank you for sharing these best practices. We want you to take these up, and we'd love you to follow up with us if you've found something interesting here that you're going to be taking on with your own community. It would be excellent to hear back from you. Thank you very much. Taylor, any last words?
Excellent joke. That's all I have.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We will be sharing all the links and resources discussed today in a follow-up email. So hang tight if you missed them here in the chat. They will be available for you soon.
All right, thank you.
Have a good one, folks.